Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, so it's June time. It's time to do our 6 monthly top champion ranking videos, and we are starting with a class that I unfortunately ranked at the bottom at the moment. That said, I do not think that there is a big gap in between most of the classes. I think bottom three are probably I think mutant and tech are relatively close together. Then mystic and skill are relatively close together, and then science and cosmic are relatively close together. But an argument is made that the classes are actually relatively well balanced. With the one problem being that mutants are kind of getting left behind because they haven't gotten much in the last 2 years or so. And that's also one of the reasons why today's video is probably going to be shorter than other class top 10 rankings because, well, not that much has changed with mutants. Obviously, the game has changed. There are, reasons why some champions are shining more than others compared to half a year ago, compared to a year ago. But ultimately, we're talking about the same 12, 13 champions being close to the top of the mutants. So here we can see the old rankings with Kitty being up top, Archangel there, Havoc sneaking in at the bottom, Professor X, and I do think that these rankings kind of have moved a bit uh, in between themselves, but there's hardly any change in the actual list of champions in the top 10. So, uh, as always, these are my own personal opinions mixed with current in-game relevance and trends, but it's impossible to escape some levels of subjectivity. So keep in mind that I'm not trying to insult your ancestors, your likes, your preferences, but realize that we all play this game differently. We focus on different mastery setups. We focus on different areas of the game and different play styles and so on and so forth. So what works for one might not work for another. What's amazing for one set of people is not going to be the same level of awesomeness to another group of people. But let's jump into it and start ranking them as I see the mutant class right now. And first, we can start with some honorable mentions. And first honorable mention goes to Iceman. Iceman's buffs is relatively fresh, and I still keep a completely open mind as he might sneak into the top 10 because, his buff is decent. Buff was quite decent. There are some problems with it. There are some things that I like about it, but time will tell whether he manages to establish himself as, like, meta useful champion. I know some people have taken him to rank 4 and 5. I almost kind of did it as well at the time, but then I had my reservations and I kind of hang back a bit. We'll see where Iceman goes, but his buff is not the best, it's not the worst, but he's definitely much, much, much better than he used to be. Another honorable mention goes to White Magneto. White Magneto is a champion that's ever present in the game, primarily because of his pre-fights. And a lot of people do underestimate him as a champion himself because he is very capable. It's just that when it comes to dealing with metal champions, he's not as good as his counterpart, but still he can be extremely, extremely powerful. And when it comes to dealing with non-metal champions, he actually kind of does it better than the Red Magneto, but at the same time, you wouldn't want to use either really if you have better options. And then another set of honorable mentions can easily go to uh, champions like Emma Frost. Emma Frost, I have always really liked. She just doesn't seem to quite measure up to the standards these days. Gambit coming out as a 7-star and having Gambit Relic with him almost all but guaranteeing critical hits on his special attacks is a massive deal. And I do think we might actually see a bit of a rise of Gambit for a while. And speaking of that Gambit relic, it makes a massive difference to Colossus. And I actually do not have a 4-star or above Gambit relic myself, but I can't wait to get one because I'd love to try it out with my Colossus. And I absolutely love Colossus at large. And yeah, I would love to see what happens when you pair a Gambit relic with him. And then other than that, we have always have had a ton of good mutant champions, like both Storm Pyramid X and OG Storm. Have their uses, and Weapon X is a solid mutant champion as well. But let's move on to spot number 10. Spot number 10, I'm going to kind of divide it in between two champions because I was really struggling to make a decision here, and which one of these champions I would put in top 10 entirely depends whether you care more about battlegrounds or whether you care more about alliance war and some challenging content. And there's always that compromise to be made, but in this case, I think it could not be clearer. For number 10, I will be putting in Sunspot as one half of it because Sunspot is a battlegrounds nuke. He is a fast battlegrounds nuke, one of the fastest possible clears of Nick Fury and a whole bunch of other champions. And if you're primarily focusing on battlegrounds, he's an amazing pull as a 7-star, amazing rank up as a 6-star, and his popularity is sure to increase at large because of him existing as a 7-star and him being an absolute prestige monster for the first several ranks of 7-star progression. And Sunspot, yeah, he doesn't do too much. He is Incinerate immune. He has a ton of debuffs that he places on opponent, and he drops Big Boom Boom on his special attacks. That often is enough. Really is. And then a complete opposite of a champion like that. And if you care to focus more about story content or challenging game modes or perhaps even Alliance War, because Professor X is a solid Alliance War champion paired with Mutant Power Boosts, it's him. He's nowhere near as popular or useful in battlegrounds. There are sometimes some metas when he can be useful, but at large, he typically would not be considered fast enough in the fast metas. In most of the challenging metas, he hasn't seemed to be thriving as well. But doesn't make him a bad champion because ultimately he isn't. There is a ton of awesome things in his kit. The best synergy with power back boosts in the game out of every champion where you can just special 3 lock opponents. And there's plenty of utility, obviously. There is, ability to bypass, evade, and miss. And there is the mind control where you can special lock the opponent and just start spamming your special attacks, projectile basic attacks, and also some amazing, amazing synergies. Now, every time I talk about Professor X, I still haven't gotten over how paradoxical his existence is in correlation with Liquid Courage Double Edge masteries, because he can make any mutant into quote unquote a Deadpool type of character that just regens like crazy with Liquid Courage Double Edge. But ironically, he himself is one of the worst champions around with Liquid Courage Double Edge. And this problem could kind of be bypassed if he had the ability to quickly and efficiently change mastery setups and do it for free. But as it exists currently, it is quite a lot of effort to get it done. In very big content like Abyss, it absolutely can be worth it, but in general day-to-day situations, it just isn't. I would love if you could bring in Professor X with Recall Masteries into a quest and actually survive long enough for him to ramp up and then make all your mutants an absolute regen machine, or just let him benefit from his own freaking synergy. That would be enough. Anyways, that's why I'm giving them a split 10th place. It just entirely depends where your priorities lie. If you care about Alliance War or some challenging content more, it would be Professor X. If you care about Battlegrounds more or casual questing, that would be Sunspot. Moving on, spot number 9, it is the most gorgeous Prince Charming, the one that you absolutely do want to kiss and then trip your balls off because it is the Poisonous Toad. He is a very, very solid champion, the best mutant addition so far in the last couple of years. If you do not believe me, we can take a look at 2022 mutant champions. We got Captain Britain, Sauron, and Toad. Toad is definitely the best. And then so far this year, we're just getting Danny Moonstar, which, could be better, could be worse. It's too early to say. We're going to see how that works out. I'm not counting in Danny Moonstar in this video's calculations because she's brand new. And then in 2021, we basically just got Kitty. So in last 2.5 years, he's the second best mutant that we have gotten. That's fact right there, and that's also part of the problem in the mutant class. That said, Toad is definitely a useful character. He's extremely efficient at dealing with skill champions at large and punishing them for purifying stuff. And offensively, in general, I do think he's kind of underrated. People do not realize that he himself can put up decent amount of damage, even not going against skill champions and getting those massive poisons. And to do that while he's, level 1 spam and prowesses and then cashing in on level 2 to finish the fight. He does have access to slow, immunity to poison, immunity to regenerate modification, access to passive stun, prowess. He kind of is, in effect, a textbook mutant character because he basically has the abilities that mutants are known for. Uh, he does have the regen, he does have the prowess, and then he does have relatively big boom boom specials. Right. That said, he's not also extraordinary. He's not the fastest. He's not the best defender. He's a good, solid mutant champion that, has his place. He's a good nick counter. He's able to counter plenty of other skill champions. He can be troublesome on defense, but almost all mutant defense is just destroyed by the existence of Nimrod. And I think that's, again, big reason why mutant class at the moment is in bottom, because no other class gets pounded into the ground as hard as mutants do. And Toad is, again, as a perfect representation of a mutant class. Just imagine Nimrod against Toad. Just die, no matter what you do. Nimrod exists, and then we obviously have Warlock that absolutely destroys the guy and half of the roster, and it is really painful. If you catch opponent without a tech champion going up against Toad, that could be some complications. But, bring in Ghost. Ghost is going to do this fight in like 20 seconds. Then bring in Nimrod, 30 seconds maybe. Warlock, easy job. Omega Sentinel, sure, why not? Any of the newer techs as well. There's just nothing really stopping anyone from stomping on this poor guy. From tech class. But still a very, very, very solid champion without a doubt. Right, let's move on to spot number 8, and this is the point where I get accused of being biased. But listen me out. Hear me out. Maybe I am, but at the same time, if I truly did not believe what I am about to say, I would not have even made that rank up, which is my first mutant rank 5 champion is Havoc. I am fully well aware that he's not the strongest mutant in the game, but I do think that player base kind of sleeps on him, and the results are relatively evident, at least to me, uh, when it comes to Havoc, because a rank 5 Havoc, believe you me, is probably the most banned champion that I run in Battlegrounds, or one of the top 3 most banned champions anyways. And it didn't used to be like that, because people let me keep my Havoc, and then he would win me a shit ton of games on defense or on offense. And then people just started banning him. And meanwhile, I have been using Havoc on Alliance War offense as well. He's been, he's always been a solid defender. He's not the quickest questing champion, but again, when need be, he can be used in quests with great level of efficiency, synergizes tremendously well with mutant power back boosts as well. And then on top of it, has access to several really, really fun cheese nodes and interactions with like energy absorption lanes and so on and so forth. Ultimately, Havoc is one of the kind of like older champions that, in my opinion, has held up very well. Increase in energy resistance is quite helpful. It's not the biggest increase, but it is still quite solid, which also makes him significantly tankier against stuff like Nimrod, so he can even hold his own on defense, for in terms of battlegrounds. He can delay that fight well enough. And he's obviously Incinerate immune, so we can use him to kill Mephistos. He's a great core counter because his mediums are projectiles, so you can fight core normally and then nuke him down with level 3. Great against energy damage champions, not obviously close same to degree as like, let's say, Human Torch is, but when you go up against champions that inflict energy debuffs, he gets significantly faster. And then obviously there is that massive, massive level 3s that just nukes down everybody. One aspect of Havoc that everybody underestimates is his plasma feedback damage. If you play your cards right, you basically, maintain like 8 plasmas on opponent, drop that heavy attack, and it's going to do a ton of damage. Ultimately, I do think that Havoc is better than many people give him credit for. Uh, if you are, outraged and completely disagree with this placement, I can kind of understand because I don't think many people would place Havoc as high in mutant class. Um, on my own personal kind of characterization, I would be happy to place him even higher. I'm serious. He has been nothing but amazing for me personally. So I think spot number 8 is kind of like a good compromise of my own personal subjective feelings, but also the fact that Havocs are being, well, making a comeback in the game because I'm not the only one running Havoc in Alliance War. We have been seeing more and more Havocs in Battlegrounds deck, in Alliance Wars, and so on and so forth. So, as somebody who has a rank 5 Havoc, I think this is a quite a fair place for him. Moving on to spot number 7, and spot number 7, still just like before, is going to be going to Domino. Now, Domino had fallen out of Mutant Top 10 for quite a while, in my opinion, and she has been brought back by two very important things. And in my previous ranking, I already kind of went over them and explained it, but obviously, we still have her ranked 7th, so her ranking hasn't really changed. So all of those things stand true. And that is the fact that number 1, she's one of the gnarliest defenders in the battlegrounds, where unless you have pretty much a perfect counter, it is going to be quite a rough time, especially if there is some sort of specialty metas that stop, free reign of tech champions. And then on top of it, Kabam has been making more and more nodes where Domino Trinity can shine, giving you, tremendous damage on your heavy attacks with those weapon nodes or just heavy assault type of stuff, where she can just completely cheese through entire quest lines. Ultimately, she is extremely powerful questing champion if you do run a synergy team. By herself, she can still be relatively solid. And that is also one of her biggest upsides, because even in Battlegrounds, where, there are no synergy teams, he is still extremely capable attacker that people routinely underestimate, and she can close out fights relatively quick. Obviously, the downside is it is RNG, and, anything can happen in that fight. But the same goes when fighting against Domino, and you never know exactly how that fight is going to go, because in between her ability to fail effects and other champions' abilities, and her evade, and her dodgy AI, and sometimes tricky animations, all sorts of things can happen. So, I do think Domino currently is the 7th best mutant in the game, or thereabouts. Spot number 6 is somebody who has fallen off. There is just no other way to put it. And that is, well, Magneto. Magneto is still obvious monster, and I think Kabam kind of regrets making Magneto as powerful as they have been, because now more and more they are taking steps to stop Magneto with the newer and releases of tech champions. Either not being metal. There are a lot of champions with randomly missing metal tags, like ooh, or there are like special nodes or special abilities that we see that prevent you from uh, using Magneto freely against several of these opponents, or like Shuri, for instance, can't be parry heavy easily, and so on and so forth. So Magneto is without a doubt losing ground, but that wouldn't be anything extraordinary, because whenever there is a dominant champion of one specific class, then Kabam is releasing counters to it. And Kabam always does this stuff with Blade. They just randomly refuse to release many villains or dimensional beings, especially for a very long time. And then with Corvus, Kabam Corvus proved more and more champions, and so on and so forth. Kabam always does that. But at the same time, there is an inherent dislike for a champion, I would say. Not necessarily dislike, uh, just that people never want to use Magneto unless they have to. And his relatively slow playstyle for fast-paced game modes also makes him kind of like less popular in a sense. Definitely, he's not all that often used, let's say, in Battlegrounds. In Alliance Wars as well, his usage definitely has significantly reduced, because, people just avoid placing easy Magneto targets. And then when it comes to the rest of the questing, he's the type of champion you don't want to take on your team until you get to a boss that potentially, is the easiest option to Magneto, and then you sub him in just before boss. There is still tremendous value in his kit. He absolutely shreds vast majority of the metal champions, and it is extremely, easy to use him. Just parry heavy, get level 3, and just stuff dies. At the same time, I do think that he's one of the most kind of like tedious champions to use that a lot of people have caught on. And initially, I got a lot of flack for saying that because I personally and most people don't really mind parry heavy champions per se, but there is kind of like this level of Magneto having only like a single hit on his heavy attack, you having to hold that pause to double your prowess, which further extends the fight and makes it feel more tedious. And then the fact, obviously, that you have to go at level 3. So he kind of combines three of the least fun or exciting mechanics, three of the most disliked mechanics in this game for, casual use. He's still great for whenever you need him. It's just that you hope that you won't. A great example for Magneto would be as well, he would be pretty much a perfect counter for half of the fights, if not most of the fights in my AQ section 1. And I brought him in once. I did like one fight with him, which was tremendously safe, you know, no problems, finished with almost full health. But I just never wanted to use him again in AQ, because who got time for that? And it just, you guys know what I mean. Again, that might be something that's personal, but to combine this with current game relevance and trends, he definitely has been seeing less use in Alliance War. He definitely has been seeing less use in Battlegrounds. He definitely has been seeing less use in Quests. Still extremely powerful, still one of those champions that you absolutely want to have access to when need be, but not somebody that you're going to run to. Don't need to. Am I right? It's kind of like Ronan in a sense. Obviously, with more abilities and stuff. Right, and moving on to spot number 5. Spot number 5 is a slight promotion, and that goes to Omega Red. Now, Omega Red is at this point one of those endless classics. I know that there will be people probably that want to rank him up higher, but I do have my reasons for not ranking him higher. And one of those is because he is borderline completely absent from all the game modes except Alliance War and Battlegrounds. And even in Alliance War, he is not used as much as he once were, but he definitely is still quite capable there. And his primary resurgence and primary popularity stems directly from Battlegrounds. When it comes to the rest of the game and the direction that game is going into, he is an outlier of mutant class. Doesn't have access to prowess. He doesn't have access to regeneration effect, buffs or passives, which is the requirement. He has regeneration effect, but it doesn't quite count. Then on top of it all, even if he manages to benefit from some sort of mutant power-up nodes, most of his damage is based on his base attack and doesn't come from his like special attacks and anything like that. So even giving him like 100 or 200% attack increase, it doesn't translate nowhere near as well as it does with the rest of the mutants, because his primarily source of damage is his death spores, and those are tied to his base attack. Now, that being said, there are organic reasons of why it is harder and harder to use Omega Red, and it has to do quite often with the animations and the elaborate special attacks that Kabam is giving to the new champions. When if champions had special attack animations as quick as Juggernaut or Captain Marvel or something like that, then Omega Red still would be much more popular. But when you look at all of the new champions that are getting released now in 2022, 2023, 2021, most of these champions have not just quite lengthy animations, they often are hard to punish, or at the very least, they are often hard to stay close to during special attacks. And not to mention that more and more we see effects that activate through block, which would be often, the play to make if you want to keep your spores and so on and so forth. So it is getting also harder to play Omega Red, and due to all the changes in animations and champion abilities with their unblockable special attacks or effects triggering through block. But all that being said, the man is still holding in there. There is absolutely no doubt that he's a Chad in a sense that he's great. He's great for battlegrounds. He's extremely versatile. He still does a ton of extremely tricky matchups, and that's why he often is worth running. One of the coolest things about him is also that when most of the mutants would not work, he can go in and do the job well. So, what I talked about before, him being an outlier mutant class, can often be viewed as a disadvantage, but it also can be an advantage. For example, whenever we are facing nodes that punishes like buffs or prowess effects or limits the special attack damage and stuff like that, that is when Omega Red shines. When if Kabam introduces Safeguard node, most of the mutants would be out for the count. Omega Red would be perfectly fine. If Kabam punishes buffs, a lot of the mutants would not work. Omega Red would be fine. If Kabam goes directly, after prowess effect or special attack damage, most of the mutants would not work. Omega Red would. So, definitely a relatively unique champion in the class, but very, very powerful and still maintains its relevance uh, one way or another. Now, spot number 4, I'm going to give to Bishop. And Bishop has, well, been one of the rising stars of Mutant class. Now, a lot of people have gotten much more used to fighting Bishop, and he isn't looked at as scary of a Battlegrounds defender anymore or something like that. But at the same time, he's always a champion where, a bit finicky AI and level 1 dropped when you don't want to, that can ruin your fight. Or, one slight error dexing his level 2 and you're screwed. And then obviously, as an Alliance War Defender, he can be extremely troublesome because, combine it with a defensive tactic, with a good placement, and things can go wrong south very, very quickly. And offensively, he's becoming and has been very viable and very powerful as well. I've seen Bishops use an Alliance War offense as well, even though not that often, but definitely, very capable of offensive champion for battlegrounds and for questing situations because he has these abilities that just correspond perfectly with mutant strong suits, just like Toad, with ability to access region super easily and with ability to access prowess effect super easily, which are two of the most common power up triggers with the new mutant nodes in quests and elsewhere. That being said, very solid synergy with some of the relics and perfectly capable utility kit. And we have Bishop. Bishop is, you know, since his buff, and initially I don't think people paid that much attention to his buff, but over time he has turned himself into, a top tier mutant class staple. Also, Bishop is one of the mutants that does not necessarily get walked over by Nimrod, which alone gives him a very, very strong distinction in the class as well. Just putting that out there. Ultimately, I'm going to be keeping Bishop in the 4th place. I think he deserves it, and I think there is a ton of value in his kit. And moving on, spot number 3, and the top 3 again is unchanged, so I am going to run through it. APOC, once undisputable king of mutant class, and still extremely capable champion in his own right, but overall, again, when we're going to be talking about top 2 mutants, they are going to be insanely amazing everywhere. And APOC is insanely amazing in Alliance War, in questing and stuff like that, but he is not up there in in Battlegrounds game mode. So if you completely don't care about Battlegrounds, then there's a good justification of putting APOC in the top spot in the mutant class. And I completely agree with that. If you don't care about Battlegrounds at all, if you take a look at all 3 of those things, like if you take a look at questing, Alliance War, and Battlegrounds, then he lands in 3rd because he's lacking the most in one of those categories in one of the groups. And it's not like APOC is completely used for Battlegrounds. He can be a relatively decent defender in some of the metas because his specials are still relatively hard to dex. He is a very tanky champion, so he can function as a relatively good defender. And with some, modifications or some special damage boost metas, he can also function as somewhat solid attacker. The problem with APOC in Battlegrounds is the fact that he doesn't have his synergy partner, he doesn't start ramped up, so you need to make do with one prowess pretty much unless you fight mutant champions. So when you use him against skilled champions, which you'd think would be the thing that you want to do, he's not, as fast or as powerful as he would be going up against mutants, and he's just not quite fast enough in most situations. And when you would use him against mutant champions, it's just redundant because mutant class at large gets destroyed by tech class so effectively that APOC, even with those extra prowesses, isn't typically as fast. So there are metas where offensively he can be very useful. For instance, the ones that increase special attack damage or something similar to that. But at large, it's hard to call him like a staple Polygon's champion. That said, still an absolute powerhouse everywhere else. Still a powerhouse in Alliance Wars, even though I have seen somewhat of a decline of his usage in Alliance Wars, but still gets tremendous results. And then obviously, arguably the best core mutant for any mutant questing path out there, right? Because he, again, has access to prowess, empowers rest of the mutants. Once he's fully ramped, he's tremendously powerful, tons of utility in his kit, and many, many things to love. So again, take this with the disclaimer that if you do not care about Battlegrounds at all, then he would arguably go up to top spot, or at the very least, there's an argument for that. Spot number 2, I'm still keeping Archangel. Archangel is a characterization of the words olden but golden, a very, very ancient champion by today's standards, but has always managed to maintain his relevance and is as present, well, everywhere in a game as ever. He is a staple of MCOC. He is a champion where, if you can Archangel it, then, well, why not? Because he is insanely fast, insanely versatile, and useful. Uh, we all know what kind of impact he has in Battlegrounds, arguably one of the most banned Battlegrounds champions. Alliance War is kind of like similar thing, wherever you can use Archangel, you're gonna have very easy and good time getting through those lanes, and the same thing goes for questing. A champion that's extremely simple and asks only a couple of questions. Do you bleed? Can you get poisoned? Yes, then you're dead. That's the mythos of Archangel, pretty much. Obviously, being immune to ability accuracy reduction is becoming more and more relevant. The ability is getting updated to the fact that he cannot have neutralize applied to him. Is like a little micro buff to him recently as well. But ultimately, yeah, he's just one of the best champions in the game, has always been, and it's hard to see a future where he isn't in a respectable position. He's one of the most influential and iconic champions of Malachans of Champions over the years, without a doubt. And I don't think many people would disagree with it. He might never rise to the top champion spot, but he will never fall into obscurity either, in my opinion. And yeah, that's much more than you can say for a lot of other champions that either get outshined by somebody or just get replaced or the game moves on from them. Archangel has always managed to stay up top, and I think he always will because his kit is super simple, elegant, and effective. That's all there is to say about him. Okay, and the final champion obviously is Kitty. Uh, People have their own opinions about Kitty. I'm making it no secret that she's not exactly my cup of tea. Now, I do have a rank 4 Kitty, and I do use her to a proficient degree. I'm by no means like the best Kitty player, but it's impossible to deny her effectiveness at all. Uh, Tons of utility, and all of that effectively stems from just a couple of core abilities. All the other extra walls of text in her kit are just kind of like a topping on an ice cream cake, but her core, her value really lies in the fact that she has super easy, reliable to access phase, and the fact that doesn't take damage whilst she in phase, and obviously the fact that she has good enough damage. All of the other stuff like incinerate immunity, access to incinerates and passive incinerates, and access to prowess and access to unblockable, and all that other stuff. It's good. It's useful. It obviously, makes her better and makes her into a complete champion. But none of that would be anything special or particular if that kit would not revolve around being able to phase and completely tank any and all damage, find easy openings, and uh, yeah, do all that other good stuff. Champion that's currently present in every aspect of the game, in battlegrounds, in alliance wars, in questing, in challenge mode contents, pretty much everywhere. That takes some getting used to for sure. There are weaknesses to her kit without a doubt. Initially, for instance, she seemed that she will be much scarier defender than she turned out to be. And she's also one of those champions where you are playing very aggressively and it's quite easy to make a mistake using her. You have to be very adept and make right, correct decisions. When to kind of slow down, when to go for intercept, and so on and so forth. And she is punishing to make a mistake with because she does have a small health pool, but at the same time she does have tremendous amount of applications of her relatively simple utilities of not taking damage whilst phasing, which can be extremely high uptime, and yeah, extremely easy to access phasing in itself, granting you openings and everything. That's kidding. He is, I think, objectively the best mutant at the moment in the game by being present and on top of every single game mode there is. Kind of similar to Archangel, just I'd argue that her utility is more applicable in more situations. But there we stand. So that is the list of mutant champions, and I don't think I need to say much more. I will put the new list here, so new mutant rankings. As I said, Sunspot and Professor X share the spot number 10, based on your personal preferences of game modes and stuff like that. Then we have Toad, Havoc, Domino, Magneto, Omega Red, Bishop, APOC, AA, and Kitty. And then we had a bunch of honorable mentions. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. And if you did, then I'm going to catch you guys soon. Bye. Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about